Hi, everybody. This is the first session of a new class, the Kabbalah of Self-Change. I'm actually a little bit ahead of ourselves because often there have been some technical problems in getting everybody in. And so I decided to try to go online just a few minutes early and see if there's any technical problems, we can work them out. So please bear with me for a few minutes until we make sure that everybody who's joining us is in fact here. So just according to, it says there are two viewers here. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and make sure that everybody who's trying to get on can get on. Also, if you could send me a chat, tell me that you're here, who you are. I don't see anybody participating live here. We'll start in just a couple of minutes, so please bear with me. Just want to make sure that people are here. I don't see anybody else. If you're here, can you please send me a chat and tell me you're here and who you are? Because I'm not seeing anything. I'm trying to call somebody who I think may be on the other end. I don't see anybody here. If you're here, don't give up. Let's give this a couple minutes. But right now, I don't see anybody on the screen. שלום חנה? כן. את במקרה משתתפת עכשיו בשיעור?
אוי, כן. אתה יודע, אני כותבת איזה אימייל לתלמידה שלי ואני משתתפת לשיעור, כן.
לא בגלל זה אני מתקשר פשוט. אני מנסה עכשיו לצרף את האנשים ואני לא רואה אף אחד כאן. זאת אומרת, כתוב כאן שיש 3 אנשים שמשתתפים, אבל אני לא רואה כלום. אז חשבתי אולי את בבית המדרש, ויש איזו בעיה טכנית. בסדר, אוקיי, אני אנסה ליצור קשר עם מישהו בבית המדרש. אוקיי, ביי ביי. Oh. Maxine, can you hear me? Maxine?
Very confusing to get onto this Hangout thing.
Oh, hi, Maxine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, boy. I don't know. Somehow you're like the computer genius or something because you're the only one
No,
that...
I'm not. I'm not. It's very confusing to get onto these darn Hangouts.
Yeah. So let me see what's going on now. Hang on a second. Let's see what's going on.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Bear with me, okay? Okay. Victor?
Yes.
Victor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You know, I don't know what's going on here. For some reason, I answered on my phone, so I can see on my phone. I don't see you on my screen.
Oh.
How long have you been online?
Oh, 1 minute.
Yeah, that was Maxine. Maxine, you just answered that? Hi, Victor.
Hi.
Yeah, how long have you been online with me? Yeah.
Just now, I'm not sure how to get to the hangout that you want me to go to.
I'm going to send you an invitation, okay?
Yes, thank you. Send it to
The KITC Beit Midrash.
perfect.
Yeah, I did before. I don't know what happened. So, okay, I'm hanging up. Okay, I see
There's
some
an echo.
people. Yeah, okay, hang on. Hopefully we'll solve that. Okay, I think we're Shalom Chana. Okay, I think we're getting more successful here. Please bear with me, everybody. Hi, Mimi. I see you there, Mimi. I see your icon, or whatever that's called. Okay, hang on. And Maxine is here, right? Maxine, you're still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Boy, we just got to find a better way to do this. It's just crazy. Every single time it's a disaster. And I don't understand why the Beit Midrash cannot get into this in the synagogue in Sacramento. It's just Chanat Babayit?
Yeah.
Okay. Another invitation. Oh,
Maybe.
Yes. Yes.
very frustrating. Well, we're gonna do this even if it's just the people here. Okay, now it says KITC Beit Midrash joined this video call.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Praise the Lord. Oh my gosh. Okay, hi everybody. Okay, so I don't know who else couldn't get on. You know, I'm going to try one more invitation that I'll go out to supposedly all. If you're already inside, don't touch anything. Go to all my circles. Right. Okay. We'll give it. I'm going to count to 30. And we're going to start. That's interesting, Mark. According to this, you joined separately. Okay, is there a feedback? Are we okay? You know what? Yeah, I think you have to turn off your microphone. I think people have to turn off their microphone.
I think it wasn't. Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Do people turn off their microphones?
Okay. That's it.
Okay, let's begin. I'm getting a bad feedback. I have the microphone on. You have to mute your mic. Mute your mic. Everybody mute your mic.
Okay.
Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay. So, welcome aboard, everybody. It's nice to see everybody in far-flung areas of the globe. Even in Maxie, where'd you move to? Are you still in?
I'm business travel, San Antonio.
Okay. Wow. That's someplace in South America, isn't it?
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So now we're going to begin in earnest. So what we're going to be discussing over this next semester, we use an academic term, is the Kabbalah of self-change. And this obviously is an extraordinarily important topic, even if this wasn't a context of exploring things from a Jewish point of view or a shiur in Torah. I get very worried by people who are not interested in self-change. That's something, even as a kid, with people that are extremely self-satisfied and everything's just perfect the way it is, then you know things are, I don't know, maybe they are perfect and I have problems. But the growth is what it's all about. But growth is so extraordinarily difficult. And I want to try to get some insights based upon Kabbalah about growth and self-transformation. And this occurs on several different levels, as we're going to explore in great depth. It occurs within the context of dealing with specific challenges. So if a person has a terrible habit, they bite their fingernails, I'm sure that that's the worst problem that we have in life. So overcoming that challenge. Or if a person like Dr. Zlotlo is absolutely perfect, but just would like to grow, he's a good example of that. He wants to grow, but he has no specific problems. So whether the problems are dealing with a specific destructive behavior or whether it's simply the desire to grow, what are the insights that we can get from particularly the Kabbalistic tradition within Judaism to help us, to inspire us, to guide us in personal growth? We're going to see that this approach is going to be very radical, extremely deep. Don't get scared away. Okay, please do not get scared away. It's going to be pretty abstract, dealing with really ultimate issues, but please do not let that deter you. Some of the themes, hopefully, you'll be familiar with from previous discussions that we've had in different analyses that we've done. Now, I had sent out to everybody a source sheet. Does this ring a bell?
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh my bubby. So this was a source sheet that I tried to send out. Someday I will master this technology, or it'll master me. But it was sent out to as a link to all of my circles, so it should have been there. And I asked that people print it. It's I spent a lot of time on this. Wow, a real lot. So what I'd like to do is not just talk at you and talk about things in general, but I wanted to do is to try to explore very fundamental texts of Jewish tradition, especially the Kabbalistic tradition. So I printed them all up. I actually have every single text in both the original language, which is either Hebrew or Aramaic, and an English translation. Isn't that amazing? But nobody has it. Not one person?
Yeah, it's on the iPad.
Oh my God! Bless you! I'm so thrilled. That's really great. Wow, something kind of worked. Oh, l'chaim. I feel so happy. So if you have it, great, and if you don't, I'll read out loud. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is focus on how the Torah itself describes this particular process of self-transformation. You know, when you go to, in a bookstore, there used to be such a thing as a bookstore, or I guess if you go online, you know, there's a lot of, there's a self-help part of the bookstore usually has a lot of sort of pop psychology kind of texts. So I'm not sure you'll find a Torah sitting there. But the Torah definitely talks about self-transformation, but it talks about self-transformation, at least at first glance, in a very particular and specific context, using a very specific term which everybody here is familiar with. So let's take a look at the first source here. We'll encounter this term. It's a term that everybody knows. Now, in this particular context in the Torah, so this is in Dvarim chapter 30, Deuteronomy chapter 30, and the Torah is speaking about the ultimate promise of redemption, that the Jewish nation shall sin, they shall be sent into exile. That's the bad news. But the good news is that that period will then be followed by redemption. But meaning that the Jewish people will be brought back to our home in the land of Israel, where I happen to be right now. By the way, there's an awesome snowstorm that's about to begin any minute here. So I hope that the internet survives the snowstorm, but it's also not so usual to have a lot of snow here. So this is very exciting. You are online live for the snowstorm, so if you have to put on a sweater, all of a sudden it feels cold, you'll know why. Okay? So in any case, the Torah describes that there will be redemption, that the Jewish people return to our ancestral homeland, and there will be a restoration of Jewish sovereignty, etc. But it's dependent upon the following. So let's take a look at what the Torah says. V'atat tashuv, and you shall tashuv. That very important word. You shall return. Tashuv. Of course, the form of that verb that many people are familiar with is the word teshuvah, repentance. Okay? But it means to return. And you shall return, you'll repent. V'shamata b'kol Hashem. You shall listen to the voice of the Lord, v'asit et kol mitzvotav, and you shall do all of his commandments, asher anochi mitzavacha hayom, that I'm commanding you today. That's verse 8 in chapter 30. Now we just skip to verse 10 just to see that verb again. Ki tishma b'kol Hashem elokecha, for you shall listen to the voice of the Lord your God, lishmor mitzvotav, to observe his commandments. Right, in juxtaposition to what the Jewish people were doing before, which led to exile, which was not to observe the commandments. V'chukotav, and his statutes, haktuva b'sefer haTorah hazeh, written in this book of instruction, this book of the Torah. Ki tashuv el Hashem elokecha, you shall return to the Lord your God b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Okay, so that root, tashuv, teshuvah, that is the word that the Torah uses to describe repentance. Now, for the next few minutes, it might even be for the rest of the session, we're going to be asking a lot of questions and showing sort of difficulty. This is sort of a typical Jewish way of analyzing things. First, present all of the problems and the questions and contradictions, and then come up with this grand answer. So, depending upon how the time goes here, we may only get to the questions and not the answers. So I hope you can bear with a little bit of frustration. Of course, everybody here is used to that in life, right? Bearing with frustration. So I want to just show you the difficulties with this idea. When the Torah describes self-transformation, which in this particular case is dealing with the Jewish people living a life which is not in harmony with God's will, and so the self-transformation is to put ourselves back on the tracks, put that railroad back on the tracks, right? That's teshuvah, to return. So I want to explore just for a moment that particular verb in the Torah, which the three-letter root is shin, vav, vet, those three Hebrew letters. What that word means in the context of the Torah. So I want to show you two very typical examples of that verb and what they mean in biblical Hebrew. So the first example, these are both famous examples, is in the context of the story of the flood. By the way, did you see that movie, Noah? Don't bother.
Not a Christian said I can't see it.
Don't bother seeing any movie that discusses a biblical theme. That's the rule number one. Okay? Stick to the book. The book was always better. Okay? So in any case, the Torah describes here sending out the dove. Okay, so the Torah says the following: "V'lo matzah hayona manoach lekaf ragla," that the dove couldn't find a place to rest. V'tashov elav el hateva, and so what did it do? It returned back to the cruise ship for more eating and sun tanning, okay, and playing bridge with other elderly friends. Fine. So that verb there, vatashov elav elateva, to return. That's our verb. Vatashov is teshuvah. That's the same root. And what does it mean here? It means to return. In what sense? In this particular example, in a spatial sense. So that's one sense we find this idea of to return to a place where you were before, spatially, geographically. The dove went out, it was in the boat, and then it comes back. Fine. Let's take a look at another case here. So this is a case in the book of Malachi, in the book of Kings. And this time it's dealing with, without getting into details of the episode, someone who had sarat. They had whatever this terrible disease is, sometimes translated as leprosy, which is probably not the right translation. In any case, Vayered Vayitbol B'Yarden Sheva Pa'amim, that this particular person went and he immersed himself in the Jordan River 7 times, Kidvar Ish Ha'elokim, in accordance with the word of the man of God. He was told this, to do this in order to heal. Vayashov Bisaro Kibsar Nar Katon Vayitar, and his flesh returned to be like the flesh of a young child, and he was purified. What a great advertisement for all these skin creams, right? The cosmetics. Your skin will be like the skin of a baby's tush. Amazing efficacy here. This is what happened here in the book of Kings, and it uses that verb, Vayashov Bisaro, and his flesh returned. So that's not a spatial return, but it's a return in what sense?
It's physical.
Yeah, a return in status, right? So his flesh returned to its previous status. I mean, it didn't return spatially. It didn't go someplace and come back, right? But so those are the only. Just take my word for it. If you go through all of Tanakh, all of Hebrew Scripture, you will see that verb, lashuv, right? Shin vavet, which is the Torah's term for transformation. It literally means to return. It only is used in 2 senses: to physically return or return to a prior status. Okay. Now, according to this definition of teshuvah, the Torah seems to be focused on a very particular and limited sense of self-transformation. And that is, we'll be talking about somebody who was absolutely sinless, like Maxine, but then, God forbid, something happened. She started to bite her fingernails. Terrible sin, terrible, horrible transgression. And then she went to a 12-step group, the Fingernail Biters Anonymous, in which she begins each session by saying, "My name is Maxine. I'm a compulsive fingernail biter." And she did the 12 steps, and lo and behold, she is sober from biting her fingernails 1 day at a time. She has now received her 30-year little badge there, and wow, it's amazing. So teshuvah would be somebody who, right, was walking the straight and narrow, because you're returning, right? You're returning either to a place or to a status. Went off the path and then coming back. So that's a rather limited sense, it seems to me, in terms of what the Torah is talking about when we talk about teshuvah. Now, I want to now explore how the sense of teshuvah, as defined by the Torah in another way, seems to be rather narrow and, I would say to a certain extent, a third-rate mitzvah. Right? There's a mitzvah to return, but it's sort of a third-rate mitzvah. Now, don't sign off right now with me saying it's a third-rate mitzvah. That's a terrible thing to say, but let me define what I mean. There are many ways of dividing up mitzvot. People divide up mitzvot into positive mitzvot, things you're supposed to do, negative mitzvot, things you're not supposed to do. Or they sometimes divide the mitzvot into our relationship between God and human beings, right? Say ritual mitzvot. And on the other hand, mitzvot which regulate our behavior towards other human beings, right? So those are all different ways of categorizing mitzvot. Another way of categorizing mitzvot, which is found in rabbinic literature, is the three following categories. Some mitzvot are what are called a mitzvah chiyuvit. That is, that a person is affirmatively obligated to perform that particular mitzvah. So an example of that would be to eat matzah on Pesach. We have an affirmative obligation to eat matzah at the Seder. There's actually a question about whether you're obligated the rest of Pesach. What if you don't like matzah? That's a different issue. The Vilna Gaon says you should eat it anyway. You get a mitzvah every time you eat it, but you don't have an affirmative obligation, but every time you eat it, you get a mitzvah point. But in any case, at the Seder is an obligation to perform this mitzvah of eating matzah. So that's a mitzvah chiyuvit, a positive obligation to eat matzah. Now, so that's a very high level of obligation. Let's go one step down. There's another kind of mitzvah called a mitzvat reshut. Mitzvah reshut. Now, a mitzvat reshut is referring to something that you have no obligation to do unless you happen to create certain circumstances. So an example of that would be the following. When you build a new home, I know, Maxine, you just moved recently, so if you build a home, so there's an obligation, especially in the Middle East, where there is not usually so much snow and they have flat roofs, and the roofs are usually used for functional purposes, hanging out the laundry, making cheese, whatever, all kinds of things. On the roof, flat roof. So there's a mitzvah in the Torah to do what? Can anybody guess what I'm talking about? On the flat roof, to build a
Railing.
fence, right? The Torah, that's amazing, the things the Torah doesn't leave to your imagination, right? The Torah is very concerned about safety. So the Torah commands us to build what's called a ma'akeh, a fence around the roof. Okay, so now you're not obligated to go build a house, right, with a flat roof so that you can then build a fence around the roof, right? So that's how it's different than eating matzah. Eating matzah is an affirmative obligation. You got to do it. This is one tier down. It's if you happen to have a house and it has a flat roof, so you have an obligation to build a fence. So that's an optional mitzvah. That is, that if you happen to be in a situation in which it's relevant, then you have this mitzvah, this opportunity to perform this mitzvah. But you don't have to go out and affirmatively force yourself to be able to have this opportunity to do this mitzvah. So that's a second tier. Now a third tier, now we're going way down. The third tier would be what we could call a mitzvah shebediavad, or bediavad. Sometimes they say that word in yeshivas. That means a mitzvah which is after the fact. Now let me explain what that means. So I'll give you two examples. One mitzvah is the following. The Torah says that if you steal something, so one of the things you have to do is v'heshiv et hagzela sher gazal. So you have to return the stolen thing which you stole. Okay. So this is a mitzvah which is only operative if certain circumstances happen to you. So you stole something, and now you're in a certain situation, and the Torah obligates you because after the fact, oi, I stole something. Now the Torah then obligates you if you stole something in order to respond properly. One of the things you have to do is return the stolen goods. I'll give you an example, another example, and that is, if unfortunately a couple gets divorced, so the Torah obligates, in order that the divorce happen, that the divorce happens through the giving of a get, a bill of divorce. Okay. Now you know how people have this idea, I just want you to appreciate this, that, whoa, there's 613 mitzvot, and I want to observe them all. That would be a very tragic attitude. Can you imagine that? I want to observe all 613 mitzvot. Okay, so eating matzah on Pesach, you're right. That's good. It's an affirmative obligation. Yeah, but I want to observe all 613, Rabbi. Okay, go build a house with a flat roof. And then you'll have the opportunity to perform the mitzvah of putting in fence around it. Okay, big investment, but I guess you're very pious and you want to invest in observing all the mitzvot. Rabbi, but that's not enough. I want to observe them all. Okay, divorce your spouse. And then you get to participate in the granting of the bill of divorce. Oh, thank you, Rabbi. This is the best news I've heard in years. I want to observe all this. Right? You get the idea that nobody in their right mind would observe or want to observe all the 613 mitzvot. I hope this doesn't sound heretical, because we have mitzvot which you only do in very unfortunate circumstances. Something happens to you, right? There's a couple wants to break up and end the marriage, so one of the 613 mitzvot is that to grant a get. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Of those three levels, so affirmative obligation to perform a mitzvah, that's number A1 class 5-star mitzvah. One rung down. You built a beautiful home, a flat roof. Wow, I get to put a fence around it, right? That's 3-star mitzvah. And then 1-star mitzvah, that unfortunate circumstances happen, right? I stole something, or a relationship is breaking up, a marriage, you got to give a get, or I stole something, you got to return that was stolen. Which one of those categories would be the mitzvah of teshuvah?
The third one. The
third one. So now, not only is the mitzvah of teshuvah something which is a response to sin, right? It's pretty limited, right? Because you're returning to a place you were before, in this case, a status. But it's also a third rung mitzvah. It's like something happened to you. Okay, so the way you respond is for teshuvah. Okay. So it's very hard in light of all of this to see the concept of teshuvah as something which is so fundamental. You know, it's a response to sin. It's a third-tier mitzvah. So let's take a look at the classical formulation in light of everything we've said of this mitzvah of teshuvah based upon the Rambam. So let's see how the Rambam formulates this in his law code. Kol mitzvot shebetorah, bein aseh, bein lo ta'aseh. All the mitzvot in the Torah, whether they're positive obligations or negative obligations, right, something you're not supposed to do. Im avar adam al achat mehen, if a person transgressed any of them, bein bezadon, bein mishkaga, whether they did it on purpose, whether they did it by accident. Shiaseh teshuvah v'yashuv mecheto. If a person then wants to repent and return from his sin, chayav litfadot, you have to articulate what the sin was. That's called vidui, confession, lifnei el baruch hu, before God. And he quotes the verse which describes that process. Let's go on now to see the second passage from the Rambam. Umahi teshuvah. Now, what is teshuvah? The term that the Torah used to describe self-transformation, ushiazov achotecheto, a person abandons the sin, v'yasiro machshavto, and drives it out of their mind. They don't even think about biting their fingernails anymore. V'mor b'libo, and they make a resolution in their heart, shelo yahaseu, that they're not going to do the sin anymore. Shenemar, as the verse says, yazov rasha darko, that the evil person shall abandon their path, that evil path. And person will regret that behavior. And God knows, who knows all hidden things, that this person who's a penitent will never return to that particular sin. And he quotes a verse. Okay. This is the typical, taking everything we've said, this is what teshuvah is. This is how the Torah describes self-transformation. Now, within this, there seems to be 3 axioms which we need to articulate. One of them is you have to have free will, right? If a person is expected to change, so they have to have the capacity to change, free will. That's number 1. Number 2, as we said before, it's a response to a specific sin. It's not an ongoing state of being. Right? It's a specific, localized response to an unfortunate situation. It's not an ongoing state of being. The third point is that someone who never sinned, let's say, well, Dr. Zlotlo, he's never sinned, so he cannot possibly do the mitzvah of teshuvah. That's why, because he so much wants to observe the 613 mitzvot, he actually told me yesterday he's going to go rob a bank. Because he wants to be able to do teshuvah. There's one of the 613 mitzvot, so he's going to go rob a bank. Don't do it, doctor, don't do it! Go the pleasure of the mitzvah of teshuvah, don't rob the bank. This is what happened to Patty Hearst, by the way, for those of you who know California.
Well, the 5 to 10 in federal prison doesn't make it.
Okay. So, free will, it's a response to specific sin. And if a person never sinned, if there was such a creature, they would have the unfortunate inability to do teshuvah. Now, in light of everything that we just said, it's rather difficult to understand the way that other sources seem to talk about teshuvah. Let me give you an example. So this is a very famous example in the Talmud, and we're now on page 2 in the way my text was printed out. So the very famous passage in the Talmud, Makom shabale tshuva umdim, in the place where people who have done teshuvah stand, tzadikim gemurim einam umdim. Even a person who never sinned, a complete tzaddik, cannot stand in that place. So a Baal Teshuvah is superior to someone who never sinned. Now, that's very hard to understand at first glance, because after all, as we explained before, sin is doing Teshuvah is a response to a specific sin. It's a third-rate mitzvah. To say that that person who observed that particular mitzvah is somehow superior to a person who never sinned, that's a little difficult to understand. Moreover, now, are you ready to get Kabbalistic? I want to share with you how a Kabbalist talks about teshuvah, and it's going to be extremely difficult to harmonize the Kabbalistic view of teshuvah with the classic definition of teshuvah as we've seen in all the sources that we've looked at. Listen to these words. Don't try to understand them completely. Okay, that's sort of a weird thing to say. Do not try to understand what we're about to learn. That's good educational technique, isn't it? Wow. Listen to these words from Rav Kook. I'll just read it in English here. This is from his great work, Orot HaTeshuvah, which we'll be talking a lot about. In the depths of life, there sparkles at every moment a new light of supernal teshuvah. I'll say it again. In the depths of life, there sparkles at every moment a new light of supernal teshuvah. I don't know what that has to do anything with the response to specific sin. This seems to be some ongoing phenomenon, a new light of supernal teshuvah which sparkles at every moment. I don't want that. I mean, I suppose if I robbed a bank every 5 minutes, I would want a new light of supernal teshuvah sparkling at every moment. But in the classical definition of teshuvah, this makes no sense. That's like saying, in the depths of life, there sparkles the opportunity to give a bill of divorce at every moment. I guess if you are a serial marrier and divorcer, I guess that might be relevant, but giving tshuva, the way we saw it, is like giving a bill of divorce. It's a response to an unfortunate situation. Let's look at some other sources from this great Kabbalist Rav Kook. Teshuvah always resides within the heart. Huh? I understand if I sin and I have to respond to the sin, but teshuvah always resides within the heart? It's an ongoing state of being? Let's read on. The spirit of teshuvah hovers in the world and grants it its primary character. I'll say it again. The spirit of teshuvah hovers in the world and grants it its primary character. The character of the entire world is determined by the spirit of teshuvah. What's this have to anything to do with the kind of normative, classic, halachic Torah definition of teshuvah? The same word. We'll read one more. This attribute of the elevation of small things to greatness does not cease for a moment, and it is the complete teshuvah through which the perfectly righteous ascend to the levels of the masters of penitence. I'll read it again, and this is for Dr. Zlotlo because he's talking about something that perfectly righteous can do. This attribute of the elevation of small things to greatness does not cease for a moment, and it is the complete teshuvah through which the doctors Lotlos of the world, the perfectly righteous, can ascend to the levels of the masters of penitence. Now I'm completely confused. He's talking about someone who never sinned can do teshuvah. Huh? I am completely confused. Huh. Now don't try to explain this, okay? I mean, that's, or else you put me out of a job, okay? So eventually you'll see this will all become utterly clear. Now, let's go on and look at more sources, which is now going to be the beginning of looking at teshuvah in a very different way. But we're going to have to talk about some very, very fundamental issues like, why do I exist? Small questions like that. Or how about even smaller questions? Why does the world exist? Okay, everybody ready? Let's study a passage in the Talmud. Put on your Talmudic thinking caps here. Let's look what the Talmud says. My dichtiv. What is the meaning of the verse where it says in the Torah, Vayi'er vayivoker yom hashishi, and it was evening, it was morning, the sixth day? Hopefully that's a familiar verse. Now the Talmud asks the following question on that verse. Hey yitera lamali. Now that phrase, and it was evening and morning of the sixth day, that phrase appears repeatedly at the end of the description of the creation of all the days of creation. Of course, it doesn't say the sixth day. It says, right, day one, right, day two, etc. Okay? But with regard to the sixth day, which is the final day of creation, right, the seventh day God went to Shul and rested, okay, and ate cholent. So on the sixth day, the final day of creation, the Torah then says, instead of Yom Shishi, sixth day, it uses the definite article, Yom Ha-Shishi. It's the only day of creation in which the definite article appears where it says the sixth day rather than sixth day. So it's peculiar. It uses the definite article, the sixth day, ha in Hebrew, ha, right? Yom ha-shishi. So why is that the only day in which it uses the definite article, the sixth day instead of sixth day? Melamed is to tell us the following. Shehitna hakadosh baruch hu im maaseh breshit. That God, after he finished creating the world, he made a condition with creation. He turns to creation and says, you know what? V'amar lehem. Im Yisrael mekablim Torah. If the Jewish people receive upon themselves the Torah, atem mitkaimim. You, the stars, the moon, the fish, the lions, tigers, and bears, the marijuana, all of you parts of creation, all of you, your existence will only be sustained as a function of the Jewish people receiving the Torah, the imlav. And if the Jewish people don't receive the Torah, ani machzir etchem letohu vavohu. I'm going to return you to the nothingness from which you came, the tohu vavohu. That's the term the Torah describes when God created, that there was this tohu vavohu. It's a hard expression to translate. Here in this translation, the Sansino, it says emptiness and formlessness. So God says, I'm going to undo creation. Now, this is a difficult passage if you think about it for a moment, because I can understand if the Talmud would say, if the Jewish people do not observe the Torah, they're going to get whacked, which in fact is true. When the Jewish people don't observe the Torah, they are sent into, they got to go to Sacramento. Right? I mean, don't be offended by that, but that's the vision, right? You're sent out of Israel, right? It could be San Antonio too. It could be anywhere. Okay, so you're sent into exile. That I would understand. Jewish people sin, they get punished. That's not what the Talmud is saying here. The Talmud is pointing to the natural creation, right? nature, not Jews. Nature, right? Lions, tigers, and bears, right? Moon, stars. God says to them, if the Jewish people sin, they don't accept upon themselves the Torah, but this is really not fair. I'm going to punish you, creation. I'm going to put you back into the formlessness and emptiness from which you came. Boy, that's not fair. I can imagine if I were a blade of grass. God says, sorry, the Jewish people didn't receive the Torah. Sorry. That, go back to Tov Vavohu. Come on, a blade of grass saying, they sinned, I get punished? I guess real life is sort of like that in any case, but I don't really understand this at all. And what's it have to do that natural existence creations depend upon the Jewish people observing the Torah? Okay, let that source now sort of hover in, don't press the delete button, just let that hover. Okay, let's go one step deeper to try to understand why it is that all of existence is dependent upon the Jewish people observing the Torah. So we're now going to take a look at a beautiful, beautiful midrash. It appears in several different forms. It's very famous. HaTorah Amra. This is the source from Yalkut Shimoni, that famous collection of midrash. HaTorah Amra Ani Hayiti Kli Umnuto Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'nohag Shabolam. The way the world operates. Melech Basar V'Dam Boneh Palterin. A king. He wants to build a beautiful palace. What does he do? Ve'eno boneh oto midat atzmo. He doesn't just go ahead, some king, and build a palace. Ela midat ha'uman. He hires a professional, a craftsman, who's going to build his palace for him. V'uman eno boneh midat atzmo. So, and even the craftsman, this contractor, who's going to build it, he doesn't build it himself. What does he do? He first has to go to an architect, and this architect will draw up blueprints. And the blueprint, it'll tell you where you build this room, and gates and doors. God did the same thing. He's going to build a palace. That palace is called the world, the cosmos. So what did he do? You need to have the blueprint. So what happened? Mabit b'Torah boreit ha'olam. So God, he looked into the Torah and then created the world. So the Torah, and there's a very famous and beautiful idea, is the blueprint of all creation. The Torah is the blueprint of all creation. The HaTorah Amra Bereshit Bi Reshit Bara Elokim Shnema Bereshit Bara Elokim Ve'en Bereshit Ela Torah. And this is actually hinted at in the first few words of the Torah, when the Torah says Bereshit Bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the world. So the word Reshit, beginning, can be an allusion to the Torah, because there's a verse where it says Hashem Kanani Reshit Darko. The Torah says God acquired me at the very outset of his path, the beginning of his path. So when the Torah says beginning, in the beginning God created, it means with the beginning. And that beginning is allusion to Torah. So with the Torah, God created the world. That the Torah is the blueprint of creation. Okay. So the Torah represents the ideal, the blueprint. Now, here's the problem. I can imagine this. Some of you have probably built homes before, your own home, and you hire the architect and the contractors and all this kind of stuff. So here's the problem. You sat down with the architect hours and hours and hours, and it's this beautiful plan of what your home is going to look like, and then they're contractors and they build it for you, and often there may be a discrepancy between the blueprint and what the guys actually built out there. In Israel, the way this is done is you get a house built and then you wait for the first rain. And then you see all of the rain coming through different parts of the house, and then you call back your contractor. Okay? Believe it or not, the our sages, and you'll see this ultimately based upon a Kabbalistic idea, a very deep Kabbalistic idea, seem to understand God's creation of the world sort of in the same way. Fantastic blueprint, the Torah. Now watch this. Let's take a look on page 3. Listen to this. This is actually a midrash. Rashi paraphrases it. The Torah, when it describes creation, so it's Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. Now, it uses a particular name of God, Elokim. A lot of words, a lot of names for God. You know that the academic, especially the 19th century German Protestant Bible scholars, they made a big deal out of different names of God, and they wanted to claim that when a certain name is used, that's an indication that this is coming from one type of document, and a different name is a different type of document, and the Torah kind of is a mishmash of all of these documents that kind of got put together, and you can kind of recreate the different documents based on the names of God. That's not the way our sages understood the uses of the different names of God. The use of the different names of God are telling you a very important message. So the name of God, as described in the initial creation, is Elokim. Elokim. So the Midrash, and Rashi here is paraphrasing it, V'lo amar bara Hashem. It doesn't use the 4-letter name of God, the famous Tetragrammaton. Doesn't use that name. Why? Later on, in the Torah sort of does a recap of creation. It does use that name. Why doesn't it use it here? Shebetchila Allah b'machshava livroto b'midat hadin. That name of God Elokim is a reference to the attribute of truth, justice, correctness, fairness, appropriateness. That's how God wanted to create the world, based upon truth. Ra'ah she'ein ha'olam mitkayem. And God saw, boy, the world's not going to be able to sustain itself. If the world is based upon truth, equity, fairness, not going to exist. Hikdim midat rachamim. So what did God do? That's why it describes in the 2nd chapter creation using God's 4-letter name, Hashem. Hikdim midat rachamim. So God then took his attribute of mercy, what some of our friends call grace, right? Not equity, fairness, but undeserved love. V'shitfa lemidat hadin, and he combined it with the attribute of truth. And that's why the Torah later on, when it describes creation, says, B'yom asot Hashem Elokim, when the Lord God created heaven and earth, right? Uses the name both Hashem, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, the 4-letter name of God, which is grace. Love. Now, love makes no sense. I think there's some parents out here. Try to parent based upon fairness, equity, truth. Well, either you'll kill your children or they'll kill you. It's not going to work. Right? Somehow we would survive raising children because we love them anyway. We can't treat them fairly. If you treat them fairly, the house is going to burn down. We show grace. That's rachamim, mercy. That's why God created the world. Now I want you to see the underlying axiom here. What's the axiom? God wants to build the world based upon a certain blueprint. What happens? He's forced to deviate from the blueprint. Now, watch this. Let's take a look at another source. It expresses the same idea. So this is a very famous midrash. Again, Rashi paraphrases it. When God creates the trees, fruit trees, so God says he's going to create Eitz Pri Oseh Pri, a fruit tree which makes fruit. But there's a weird thing. After God actually creates it, so the Torah doesn't say a fruit tree creates fruit. It says Eitz Oseh Pri, a tree which creates fruit, not a fruit tree which creates fruit. Now you might say, so what? There's not a word in the Torah which is superfluous. If the Torah says that God said, I'm going to create a fruit tree which makes fruit, and then he actually creates, and it's instead of saying fruit tree which creates fruit, it says tree which creates fruit, instead of fruit tree which creates fruit, that's telling you something. Let's take a look at the Midrash as paraphrased by Rashi. What does it mean? A fruit tree which creates fruit? She'ehei tama eitz ketama pri. That the original intention was that the tree itself would taste like the fruit. You'd be able to go up to an apple tree and bite the trunk. Delicious. A Fuji trunk apple tree. Bite the trunk and it tastes like a delicious Fuji apple. That's what it means, eitz pri, a fruit tree. The tree itself is delicious. But that's not what happened. V'hi lo astachem. The earth didn't produce that. Ella, v'otei etz eitz oseh pri. Instead, it was a tree which produced a fruit. By the way, the word for tree in Hebrew, eitz, also means wood. Also means wood. So, if you bite into the trunk of the tree, nowadays, what do you taste?
Wood.
It's like eating wood.
Termites.
Okay? There's a pizza place over here. I don't know why I'm thinking about this. You know, they give you these little, in Israel, I don't know if they do this in the United States, there's no kosher pizza in Sacramento. When you buy a pizza pie, they also give you these little cardboard rectangles to eat your pizza on. Do they do that in America? That's what they do in Israel. It's like a plate. You put your piece of pizza on this cardboard rectangle. So they give you a whole bunch of these cardboard rectangles. There's a pizza place, I won't want to mention the name of it. You wouldn't know any difference between eating the cardboard rectangle and the pizza itself. Exact same taste. That's what happened. God wanted to create this fruit tree producing fruit. But it turned out that if you bite into the tree, it wasn't a fruit tree. It tasted like wood. Only the fruit tastes good. Okay? Lefichach shenit kalel adam avono nifkada gamhi alavona v'nit kalala. You know, that's why when, after man sinned, so God also punished the earth. If you remember, after Adam Rishon, man, Adam, he sinned, so God punished the earth, right? The earth would be cursed. So, the earth is cursed? Punish man. Why is the earth cursed? Oh, because the earth sinned. It was supposed to produce what? Produce trees in which the trunk of the tree was as good as the fruit on it. And the earth didn't play ball with God. The earth sinned. Right. Now, what do we see here? The assumption in this midrash that there was a gap between the divine ideal, the creation as envisioned in the blueprint, and the real. The earth didn't turn out like God wanted it to turn out. Right? So we saw two midrashim which expressed this idea. The last midrash about God wanted to create with the attribute of truth didn't work. God wanted to create fruit trees in which the tree itself tasted like the fruit. Didn't work. There's some kind of gap between the ideal of the blueprint and the actualization, in fact, of creation. Okay, so I want to just show you how Rav Kook explains more deeply this idea that of this weird midrash, right? Midrashim are not necessarily meant to be taken literally, but they're very definitely meant to be taken seriously, right? You don't have to believe that literally, you know, God wanted the trunk of the tree to taste good, not just the fruit. And then the earth misbehaved, it produced trees in which the trunk tasted like cardboard. What's the idea? What's that trying to teach us in a very colorful way? So now we're going to get Kabbalistic again. Look how Rav Kook explained this. So it's on your source sheets there. The way it was printed up, it got sort of cut off. So I'm going to read it from this text here, and you'll hear the idea. At the inception, this is Rav Kook, of creation, it was intended that the tree have the same taste as the fruit. That's what we just read. What does that mean? Here, put on your seatbelts. See if we can figure this out. All the supportive actions that sustain any general worthwhile spiritual goal should be by right experienced in the soul with the same feeling of elation and delight as the goal itself is experienced when we envision it. So to just put that in plain English, there's a goal, and there are the means to the goal. So really, in the ideal, that the journey towards the goal should be as delightful as the goal itself. Now, but that's not what we experience. But earthly existence, the instability of life, the weariness of the spirit, when confined in a corporate frame, that doesn't mean corporate like IBM, it means corporal, physical. The fact that we live in this physical world brought it about that only the fruition of the final step, which embodies the primary ideal, is experienced in its pleasure and splendor. So the means towards the end, which should have been as delightful as the goal itself, in fact became wearisome, difficult, bitter, and only the fruit, right? The end goal is sweet. The trees that bear the fruit, with all their necessity for the growth of the fruit, have, however, become coarse matter and have lost their taste, right? The tree doesn't taste good, only the fruit. This is the failing of the earth, right? That's the sin of the earth, because of which it was cursed when Adam was also cursed for his sin. Meaning earthiness. The nature of physicality is such that there is a horrible defect, that the nature of earthiness is that it's bitter, tiresome, exhausting, frustrating. That's a defect which is within the way the world turned out. But every defect, Rav Kook says, is destined to be mended. Thus we are assured that the day will come when creation will return to its original state, when the taste of the tree will be the same as the taste of the fruit, that earthy corporal life, the journey, the struggle itself will be delicious, just like the goal. That the tree will be as sweet as the fruit. The trunk will be as sweet as the fruit itself. The earth will repent, as it were, of its sin, and the way of the practical life, of worldly life, will no longer obstruct the delight of the ideal, which is sustained by appropriate intermediary steps on its way toward realization, and will stimulate its emergence from potentiality to actuality. So there is a defect in the world. That defect is of pain, of suffering, of bitterness. And the ideal is some kind of far-off sweetness that we don't, it's way up there, far off. But that defect in the world will in fact be ultimately rectified. Okay. So what is Rav Kook saying here? Rav Kook is saying that there is the ideal, the same kind of ideas that we saw in those two midrashim. There's the ideal, but what happened to that ideal? That somehow physical creation was far short of the ideal. It doesn't have the sweetness of the ideal, but Rav Kook says that that will be, in fact, corrected ultimately. Ultimately, that will be corrected. And somehow this physical world will partake of the sweetness that was the original ideal. Okay. Now, I want to try to explore this idea a little bit deeper. You know what? Can you give me 5 more minutes? Because we got sort of a little late start, so we'll go till 8:15 your time. Okay, 7:15 a.m. my time.
It's 9:50.
Okay. I'm sorry, 9:15, right? Thank you. That's not a problem. Okay. So, thank you. So, we'll just go for another 5 minutes. I want to try to explore this idea more deeply of somehow the ideal and the real in terms of the process of creation. Let's take a look at another source here. We're going now to the 4th page. Another famous midrash found in the Talmud. Or shebarach HaKadosh Baruch Hu bayom rishon adam tzofeh bo misofo olam v'ad sofo. You know what was created on the first day? Light. Okay? That's a little weird. Where's our light come from? Besides electricity? Forget about that. The real source of light in the cosmos. The sun. Thank you. Can anybody tell me what day the sun was created on?
4th day.
Wednesday.
4th day.
Now I'm having a very terrible cosmological crisis here.
Right.
Also having a cosmetic crisis. I got to go to the beauty parlor. So I don't get it. The sun is created on the 4th day, and the light is created on the 1st day. What kind of light is that? So our sages say in the Talmud that God created some kind of light. It's not a normal light. And with that light, one would be able to see infinitely from the end of the world to the other end of the world. But then God looked at the world. He looked at the generation of the flood. He looked at the generation of the building of the Tower of Babel. He saw how corrupt the world would become. Amad ugnazo mehen. So he took that light that was created on the 1st day, the spiritual infinite light, he hid it away. Ulami gnazo, and who did God hide it for? Litzadikim, for the righteous, latid lavo, in the ultimate future. So what do we see here? That there's the original ideal, that infinite light of the 1st day, and then God says the real is incompatible with that light, hides it away. But that light will ultimately shine again in the ultimate future. So what do we see here? That there are 3 stages in creation. The original perfect ideal as expressed in the Torah, the blueprint, the actual building of the cosmos, right? You have a contractor builds your building, all kinds of leaks, all kinds of problems. But 3rd stage, the ultimate rectification and a return to the original ideal. Return to the original ideal. What is the Hebrew word for return? Teshuvah. You realize now that we're talking about teshuvah, we're no longer talking about a person who bites their fingernails and wants to change that terrible sin. We're talking about the very fabric and nature of existence, the very process of creation, not just human behavior on a small level of responding to the fact that I robbed a bank. The original ideal of creation, the faulty reality, and the ultimate rectification. Okay, now I want to just show you how the Kabbalists express this same idea. We're going to take a look at Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal, in his Kabbalistic work, The 138 Doors to Wisdom, Kalach Pitchei Chochmah. The worlds were created in a manner that they could ascend from their levels. For was it not for this reason that they descended originally at the time of the shattering, so that they could ascend little by little until everything ascends to the level of perfection as before the shattering? All of a sudden, now we're being introduced to a Kabbalistic notion, the shattering, shvirah, that Hebrew word shvirah, shattering. So what's the Ramchal describing here? that the worlds are created in a way that, in fact, there was an original ideal, but a crisis took place. What's that crisis in Kabbalistic terminology? The shvirah, the shattering. It's usually called shvirat kelim, the shattering of the vessels. We will talk more about that next time, what that means. But that, in fact, that crisis of the shattering of the vessels, that happened so that ultimately there could be a rectification, he says, the last few words there, so that ultimately everything ascends to the level of perfection as before the shattering. Ascends to the level of perfection as before the shattering. What happens? The cosmic process of creation ultimately involves a teshuvah, a return to the state of existence which was before the shvirat kelim, the shattering of the vessels. Let's take a look at the same idea as expressed by Rav Kook. The process of all existence is built on the foundation of teshuvah. Existence reveals itself as a descent from divinity to worldliness. But this descent has hidden within it the foundation of supernal elevation. So the existence is such that there's a descent from the ideal, from divinity to physical defect, worldliness, but hidden within that is in fact the process of returning, of going back up, supernal elevation. And one more source from Rav Kook, which expresses this idea, and then we will pause until next week. Rav Kook says, we perceive reality as an existence that begins from its source, descends initially from above to below. So creation involves a descent, a decline, a deviation from perfection, from a supernal essence to a lower essence, until it reaches the lowest descent. The lowest descent. It then returns to ascend. Returns to ascend. What's return? Teshuvah. And gradually ascends from its lowly descent, from the lowest depths to the highest heights, until its ascent to its source in supernal hiddenness. Very flowery, beautiful language. That the creation will ascend from the lowest depths to the highest heights until its ascent to its source in supernal hiddenness. In this manner, existence, in all its forms, can be well understood. If we understand this doctrine, we will understand the nature of our existence. You'll understand why you don't have enough money in your bank account. You'll understand why you bite your fingernails. You'll understand the frustration with the relationships and all of the different things that we encounter in life, which are difficult, if we understand this doctrine well. Okay, we're going to pause at this point right here, and we will then go on next week to get a more full understanding of why this happened. Now let me just leave you with a thought. You see, you realize, according to this, if someone builds a building, you hire somebody. There's an architect, beautiful plan, and then he builds it, but it somehow deviates from the ideal, and the rain is coming through the roof, and then you got to hire somebody to fix it. I understand that. But who is responsible for the building of this palace, of the cosmos? G-D. And who wrote up the blueprints? G-D. And who then implemented the blueprints? G-D. So God messed up. I'm going to sue him for malpractice. A typical contractor. I mean, this needs explanation. Why it is that God couldn't create the cosmos in accordance with the ideal plan, that instead everything got fouled up. You notice, by the way, that the fouling up, we'll discuss this more next week, is it a function of necessarily, it's a little subtle point, we'll discuss it more next week, of something we did? The fouling up happened even before Adam deviated from his diet. So this needs explanation. Why did the cosmos come into being in a way in which it deviates from the ideal, in which there's a descent? So that will be discussed next week. These are very profound issues. And we will come away over the next few weeks with a very deep understanding of Teshuvah, which will create a framework for our own personal growth and personal return to the ideal of what we can be. I wish you a beautiful week, and you can. This will all be on the YouTube if you want to watch it again. And tell your friends to come. There's plenty of space here in the room to have more people come. These are very important issues. They're so fundamental, and it would be a very wonderful gift to offer your friends and enemies to participate in this exploration of such fundamental issues. So we will see each other, Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
תודה רבה.